Okay, so for this week's video, we're going to look at what I'm going to call composition exercise number 2. So for composition exercise number 2, what we're going to do is we're going to take something that is familiar to us and then change it. So I'm going to take something that is maybe familiar, maybe not familiar, and change it a lot. And when I talked to one of my friends about all the things that I was going to change for this one, he said, "Wow, that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of work to do." And yeah, it definitely was, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. So without further ado, composition exercise number 2, as I've done it, I'm taking the chord changes from the rhythm changes, which are from I Got Rhythm. I'm not going to play those. You can look that up anywhere. But I do have a picture roughly written out of them and their form. Take it from the key of B flat down to the key of A. Instead of having each chord being worth 4 eighth notes, I'm going to use a random number generator so that each one is worth somewhere between 2 and 6 eighth notes. The scoring is going to be for a string orchestra with some winds, and then I'm going to create a new melody as well. So in breaking with tradition, I'm going to start off by playing the end result. If you like what you heard, you want to hear how we got there, yeah, keep watching the rest of the video. And if not, thanks for watching this far. Going from the beginning, which is kind of the first round of what I've done for this exercise, put all the chords across 4 strings, not 5. Nothing too crazy, really simple voice leading, as much stepwise motion as possible, and a few leaps that make sense, like leaps of an octave. Leaving the violin 1 open for what will eventually become the melody when I write it. So let's listen to that now. Okay, so to go from part 1 to part 2, part 1 sounds still fairly jazzy despite the fact that it's in very much changing time signatures. So one of the things to do to fix that was to get rid of some of the typical that era jazz chords. So the big one being the B flat 6, replace that with a bare 9 with no 7th. In a couple of spots, like in measure 3, do a tritone substitution, which you can argue whether that's a jazz or a classical thing. And then that affects some of the voice leading that you get in the inner voice parts. And the one spot that really got tricky for me in terms of thinking about what to do was the B section, because the B section really is just implied dominance, cascading, leading back to the 1. And so if you want to change the 3rd chord in to whether it's a tritone substitution or whether it's something else that has the same sort of function, do you necessarily have to change the chord for it? If, each, in theory, 2-measure phrase leads into the next 2-measure set. I decided not to bother. Just change them anyways. And yeah, that's pretty much the changes going from part 1 to part 2. So here's what part 2 sounds like. So I think that sounds a lot less jazzy and a little bit more contemporary art music. So the next step to take it into being the next piece is to actually put a melody in and make sure that it is something that is not very jazzy. So there's a lot of bare 9ths, bare 7ths, and non-chord tones in the melody, as well as rhythmic choices that really highlight the changes of meters. And kind of going with the idea of an AABA form, taking the melody and just adapting it to where the time signatures are for the second time through the A section and subsequent 3rd time. For the B section, knowing that I'm going to add woodwinds in, I've left a bunch of space for woodwind melody. It's almost like trading twos. If you were kind of improvising in a jazz form, you might have, instead of just taking a whole chorus yourself, trading twos. Okay, let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, going into part 4, I added in woodwinds. Now, because this is some hypothetical group and not some group that I'm actually writing for, it doesn't matter what instruments I pick. And this is something that's really important to note when you are doing writing. If you're trying to write for a group that exists, you need to write for the instruments that are in that group. If you are creating a hypothetical ensemble that you would like to get played, it might be a safe bet to go with an ensemble that already exists. Standard things like woodwind quintets, string quartets, brass quintets, things like that, that there are ensembles out there that already have those members. That is more likely to get played than something that you just create yourself. Then again, if you have an ensemble that you know of that is a different ensemble, feel free to write for them. Knowing that this will never get played by anybody at any point, decided to go with a tenor sax and a contrabassoon instead of a couple more standard parts of an orchestra. Most orchestras that I've heard of don't have a tenor sax in them, though I think they should. Anyway, in the B section, I have used the flute for the melody space to correspond with violin 1's spaces that they left. But otherwise, throughout, basically just doubling the bass to the contrabassoon, the cello into the tenor sax, the viola to clarinet, violin 2 to oboe, and violin 1 to flute. In a couple of spots, changing octaves where it makes sense. So here's what that sounds like. Okay, so we started off by listening to the final product. We're actually going to listen to it again. Going from the fourth part to the final part, the fifth part, really just adding in dynamics, articulation, some phrasing, things like that. And then in that B section, where you've kind of got these long chords, putting in some changes in the rhythm to make it a little bit more interesting. Yeah, that's, I think, the big change there. That's really what takes it from being a sketch to being more like a piece of music, is putting in phrasing and dynamics. That's really what gets to the next step. Okay, if you've made it this way through the video, this far through the video, thank you very much for sticking with it. Thanks for watching the process through here and all the things that we've done with exercise number 2. As you may or may not be able to tell, I enjoy working with a pencil and paper as much as I can, but then of course going into a computer. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on this whole process, anything that you're working on, and yeah, if you didn't like it, tell me that too. Tell me what you didn't like. Thanks for watching. Hit that like and subscribe button. See you on the next one.